The 7 covenants of God. We said, I'll do this every week, to remind you it's a binding agreement or a promise, right? And sometimes it involves a relationship between God and man, or between man and man, individuals and groups, has responsibilities, has blessings, has cursings. If you will, then I will, sort of agreements, and usually are military, political, business, even marital covenants. God's covenant, I believe, are revelatory by nature, that as man lived and evolved and grew and became more and more sophisticated and civilized, that God opened the curtain more and more and more and showed himself to us.
Yes.
Okay? The first one was, of course, the Adamic, which is a covenant of works that points out that our sin and we're sinners and that we have consequences of it. And the seal was the Sabbath. The second was the Noahide. It was a covenant of morality. God gave us rules to live by. The 7 laws of Noah are enumerated, and we went through those in a previous teaching, okay? And the sign or the seal is a rainbow. And the third covenant was the Abrahamic covenant. The Abrahamic covenant, again, was the cutting of animals in half and the torch passing through, and God committing himself to Abraham as a permanent blessing, that he was setting aside a family to be separate and to be different. And he promised them that they would have a great name, that they would affect nations, that he would have as many descendants as the sand and the stars, and that they would have a land, and that their sign or their seal would be circumcision. And that's what marked Jews for millennia, was circumcision. The fourth covenant we discussed last week. The fourth covenant we found in Deuteronomy 30, and it was that there was a promise of a homeland. A promise of a homeland for the Jews. And this was insignificant to anybody until 1948, when the Jews returned and went, whoa, God kept his promise. That he said you would have a homeland, and that got everybody's attention then in the theological world. It's a extension and further revelation of the Abrahamic covenant, that he would have a home. He said everywhere that you look, you can see. At first he said everywhere that you trod or walk will be yours. And then he said even if you can see it, I'm going to give it to you. Yeah. So it's an extension of this revelation. The sign or the seal that was given is, I will prosper you and I will bless you. I will prosper you. And even in the exile, the one thing that a lot of people don't like about the Jews is that they got rich. Even in exile, even away from their home, even away from any blessing, the Jews have always prospered and they've been blessed. That doesn't mean there aren't poor Jews, but as a people. And he has blessed them with intelligence, and he has blessed them with invention, and he has blessed them with insight. Folks, this is not genetics. This is supernatural.
Yes.
This is God putting his hand on a people. And we can see a parallel of that in the United States. Can we not?
Yes.
That we were a nation who was committed to the principles of God and founded on those principles, and we excelled around the world.
Yes, sir.
And have become the mightiest and the most prosperous and the most blessed nation in the world. Well, people that say that's arrogant and that's selfish and that's blowing ourselves up are spitting in the face of God. But they're so pagan they don't care. They don't care that they spit in God's face. They don't believe in him. They won't follow him. They're not going to do anything about it. We as Christians need to be unapologetic. We need to be unapologetic that we are, if someone says Christian nationalist to you, say proud of it. Because Christian nationalist to them means somebody living up in Idaho collecting a bunch of guns to overthrow the government. Christian nationalist to me says one nation under God. Period. Now you can have your definition of Christian nationalist, I'll have mine. But you don't force me to call you a male or a female if you aren't. And I won't force you to change your idea of Christian nationalist. I'm not going to agree with your definition if it's wrong. Does that make sense? You can call yourself a socialist nationalist if you want to, but you're a communist. I'm not changing my definition for you. That's the way it is. And the same thing is true with God's people. They are blessed. God prospers them. Are they right about everything? No. Are they knuckleheads about some things? Absolutely. Do they make some bad decisions as a nation? Absolutely. But you compare them to anyone around them, any of the nations around them, and they're just pretty smart and pretty civil and pretty humanitarian.
Yes, that.
You know, it's the old idea is, when is the last time you saw a bunch of Christians and a bunch of Jews take a bunch of people and behead them because they didn't like their religion? It ain't happened. It hasn't happened. And yet we're losing 3,000 Christians a day to execution. All right, let's get into the fifth covenant then. We've studied 4 of them. Our fifth covenant now. Let's go to Exodus 19. We're not going to read all 5 chapters, but I give it there to you to look at, okay? Exodus 19, the first verse says, "In the 3rd month after the sons of Israel had gone out from the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. When they set out from Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness, and there Israel camped in front of the mountain. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, 'Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel.'" So this is Moses and his covenant with God at Mount Sinai. Now, is it just with Moses? No, it's with all of the children of Israel. It says, "Tell the children of Israel, this is what I say." Moses was the spokesman. Have you ever heard the phrase, "Don't shoot the messenger"? They sure tried, didn't they? Every time Moses came down, they were ticked off at him. And he was just the messenger. He's just giving the word. And old Aaron, what does he do while Moses is up on the mountain? Hey, back in Egypt, we had 2 cows that we've worshipped. You know? There are 2 cows. One that's for life and one that's for the afterlife and in the death. Let's cover our bases and let's make a cow. And let's dedicate it to Jehovah. Now, see, this is a real problem. Let's take a pagan god and donate it and dedicate it to the living God. Aaron, yes, you're an idiot. Okay? And he learned, didn't he? And then the entire book of Deuteronomy covers much of the covenant because it's the details. The details. And Leviticus goes into the priestly details of this covenant that we call the Mosaic covenant after Moses. The covenant of Moses. This is where the 10 Commandments come in. What are the 10 Commandments? A further revelation of the Noah rules. Right? God opened the curtain a little more and said, okay, here's what I meant when I said this. Here's what I mean. And again, the Jews believe that during this period of time, the 10 Commandments were just a follow-up for the Noah covenant of 7 rules, but that God actually gave 613 commandments on this mountain. 1 for each bone in your body, by the way. You have 613 bones in your body, you got 1 law for each one. Why? Because this is the makeup of the body of God and his laws for man. He made you with 613 bones, he's got you with 613 rules. That there are commandments of 613, which, by the way, the Jews believe is why pomegranates are so blessed, because they believe that they have 613 seeds. They don't. A lot of people have counted since then, but it's still just, it's a romantic thought. It's a romantic thought. It's a memorial thought. It's a, I want to think of God, and so I'm going to wear a cross. I'm going to think of God, I'm going to eat a pomegranate. It's a memorial. It's a love tap towards God is what it is. And so here we have this whole Mosaic law of basically saying, for all these 1,000 years now, you've traipsed around with Abraham and you've had all this stuff going on that you've had, but now we're going home. The land that was promised, we're going home. And I don't know about y'all, but have you ever, like, when you had kids, when you had little kids, did you ever have a talk with them before you went into somebody's house of how to behave?
Yes.
Did you tell them how to behave in a restaurant before they went in? You know, we're going into this restaurant. I don't want you standing on the table screaming like a banshee. It's not what we do. We're going into the Johnson's house. Don't run up and down the stairs. You know how that makes Miss Johnson nervous. You know, you have a talk with them, right? Well, this is God's talk with the children of Israel before they went home. This is how I want you to behave. You're about to get a land. You're about to get a place. And I want you to know how to behave when you get there. Because once I let you loose in that land, you're going to be on your own quite a bit. You're going to be to your own devices. And if I don't tell you now how to behave, I may not get you guys together again. So now this is the rules of how to live in the land. We know that it would have only taken 40 days to go from Sinai to the Promised Land. It would have taken about 38 days to reach Jordan River. A couple of days to prepare and cross the river. Would have been done. How long did it take them? 40 years instead of 40 days. Now, why did it take 40 years to get around there? The first generation defied God. If you built the calf, you don't get to go in. They stayed in the desert till the first generation died out. God said, you already broke too many rules to get in. But if for 40 years I can keep your kids in line, and if they don't pull some bonehead stunt like you did at the bottom of the mountain, then we'll cross over. And we'll cross the river. And I'll give you the land. So it took them 40 years for the generation to die out. What an amazing thing that happened. Their shoes never wore out in 40 years of walking through the desert. Their clothing never wore out in 40 years. That's amazing. And in the desert, there's not a lot to eat, especially for a couple million people. I mean, how many rabbits can you kill to feed 4 million people? How many lizards can you cook? But God said, don't worry, I'll provide. And every morning he did. And where do you find a water hole for that many people? You speak to a rock. Don't strike it in anger, though. Moses struck in anger. What happened to him? He didn't get to go. You see, for 40 years, he tested the people to see if they could follow the rules, and their leader couldn't do it for 40 years. He wasn't down with the cows. He wasn't down with the calf. But he struck the rock when God said not to strike it. He was angry. He was ticked off. Come on. You ever get mad and ticked off? And the Lord said, you're supposed to give thanks and praise me all the time, and you get ticked off and huffy and say something you shouldn't or do something. I'm not proud of this, but I have to confess it. Please, young people, don't do this. This bone right here in my hand is broken. Now it's healed beautifully. But one night, I was having a row with a Christian brother. Literally, it was on how we were going to do a church service. And I had a word from God. I believed that this is what we were supposed to do. It was in a Christian coffee house. I was in college, and that's when Christian coffee houses were the trend. We had a big one. We had over 150 people every night. And we had Christian bands who were singing and getting their chops, learning how to worship rather than just play. And I knew that we were supposed to have this order of service, and this one brother who was young, not very spiritual yet, picked a fight with me. And I wasn't going to fight with him. I mean, verbal, not fist fight, but verbal. I'm not going to argue with you. And I said, I'm going to submit to you. Rather than argue and rather than break the spirit, I'm going to submit to you. You do it your way. You're in charge tonight. But when I went through the swinging doors, I hit the door with my hand in anger. I was pushing the door open, but I was ticked off, and I hit it with my fist, and I got what's called a boxer break. When a boxer hits it wrong, and my knuckle slid clear down into the palm of my hand. My finger was this long. It's that long. It disappeared. And my bone was down here. And I went, oh darn. Oh my Lord, look what I have done. In your name, oh Lord. So I had to go to the hospital. It took 3 orderlies wrapping gauze around my finger, and 3 of them had to pull my bone back out until it snapped into place again. I thank God. I thank God every time there's a storm. Yeah, the weather's changing. It's the only sign that I have of that sin in my life. The sin in my life. But that's what it was. I got ticked off and acted it out. With my mouth I said, okay brother, you do it your way. In my heart I went, that's what I'd like to do to you. Well, guess which one God saw? It's the intent of my heart. Intent of my heart. And I had to repent. While they were pulling on my finger, 3 big orderlies with gauze wrapped around, all tugging. I went, Lord, I promise I won't do that again. And the night was miserable. The night was absolutely miserable. And the brother came back and repented. So the Lord had his way that night. But I sometimes think of Moses striking the rock, and I go, I'm no better. I'm no better. Been there, done that, Moses. Thank goodness I get to go to the promised land. I still get to go. I don't have to stand on the nearest mountain and look across the river and see the land on the other side. Bless the Lord, O my soul. What a gracious God of mercy. But the Mosaic covenant, then,